Hello, and thank you for joining us on the issue today. My name is Victor Mwila. On this episode, we're looking at measures aimed at safeguarding Zambia's forests amidst the rise in demand for charcoal, as Zambia faces increased load shedding, or what you may call power rationing. The Ministry of Green Economy and Environment has effected a charcoal ban in selected parts of the country. We will be addressing this and many other issues related to the demand for alternative energy sources in the face of climate change. In the studio, I'm hosting Director of Green Economy and Climate Change in the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment, Ephraim Shitima. Mr. Shitima, thank you so much for making an appearance on the issue program today.
It's our pleasure, Mr. Mwila, and thank you for inviting us.
Great. We really appreciate the ministry, and we feel that the ministry is very important, especially in this time that the country is grappling with effects of climate change, and we've been in a drought situation for quite some time. At your ministry, there is a strategy that you've come up with, and this is aimed at addressing, or should we say safeguarding, the forests. What we are going through, definitely without a question, has an impact on the forests. So just from the outset, let's look at what specific strategies have you put in place as a ministry to address the challenges that we continue to face of depleting the forests that are also very important actually in addressing effects of climate change. What are these strategies that you've put in place?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwila. And indeed, the challenge that we are facing of the drought and of course what has resulted in power rationing, it's natural for people to just revert to alternative sources of energy when we don't have electricity. And of course, charcoal becomes the easiest option to go for. So we are aware that the demand for charcoal, for example, has increased. And of course, both the charcoal producers would want to cash in, and the communities would want to have some energy that they can use in the absence of electricity. But that would only dig us into deeper waters in terms of the challenges of climate change, because trees are helping us to address this, and in the future we could even have a worse situation. The drought that we have now is unprecedented, which is why we are facing very serious challenges. So we've put in place measures to try and address this. One and the most important is communication and sensitizing the communities that we shouldn't focus on utilizing the charcoal because we are making the situation worse. And the second is to now provide alternatives, because the issue that has been there is what are the alternatives that people can use in the absence of charcoal. And I think together, operating as one government, the Ministry of Energy and others are promoting other renewable energy sources such as solar, LPG and all that people can use instead of relying on charcoal. But we will go beyond that. We have provisions in a number of policy instruments. For example, we have a policy on forestry, we have legislation on forestry, we have strategies on climate change. So we are using all those tools to help us and explain to the communities on how we should navigate these crises that we are facing without making it worse on ourselves in the coming years.
Let's look at the declaration by the president. That was on 29th February.
That's correct.
2024, when the president declared the drought a national disaster and emergency. How did you receive this as a ministry, and how are you responding to the declaration by the president?
The declaration by His Excellency the President is significant, and that it was timely, because the situation that we are facing is unprecedented, and you require to be in an emergency mode to respond to this. Essentially, I think he outlined two priorities to ensure that no one dies of hunger because of the situation that we are facing. So food security has become most important in this context. But the second one is to ensure our energy security, that we are able to have electricity that helps us, because electricity and energy in general drives our economy. So from our perspective, as the Minister of Green Economy and Environment, we are working closely with other ministries. As you know, there has been a national response responding to that. And our view is to ensure that the responses that all ministries are undertaking ensure that we enhance our resilience, we build our resilience. There are two examples that I can cite. You know, in response to this, that the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development has reallocated the constituency development funds to focus on building resilience in the communities. So in that context, we are sharing the provisions that we have in a number of policy instruments. We have the National Adaptation Plan that outlines how we should respond to the impacts of climate change. We have a green growth strategy that the minister launched just a few months ago that also outlines how we should transition to a green economy. And we also have our national determined contributions. So we have teased out from these documents interventions that need to be implemented and sharing these with the other government functionaries who are implementing this. The same way, the Minister of Agriculture is promoting food security, as we said, including provision of support, additional support to farmers, producing winter maize, for example, and others. Again, we are sharing what are the interventions in this response that will ensure that we don't just handle with this short-term emergency response, but we build the resilience of our farmers going forward. So that's how our response has been. It is to facilitate this national response to ensure that it builds long-term resilience and ensure that when we face a similar situation in the coming future, we'll be more better prepared to respond to its impacts.
Okay, back to the issues of charcoal, and there's a charcoal ban in effect.
Correct.
So I would like to find out how effective do you think this is in addressing or curbing deforestation?
Yes, the Honorable Minister of Green Economy and Environment, Honorable Engineer Collins Nzovu, effected a ban in the 3 districts. I think it's important to be clear that it is 3 districts that were picked, and this is in Central Province, that is Mumbwa, Sibuyunji, and Iteji-Teji, where the ban has been effected. Basically, it is suspending the issuance of code licenses. These are the licenses that enable the charcoal burners to produce charcoal in a sustainable way, cut selected trees and produce in a given area. But the minister got consent with the amount of charcoal, and some of which produce illegal without these licenses, and to control that, he effected a ban in the 3 districts.
Why specifically in the 3 districts? Are they the most producing areas?
Well,
when you're talking about charcoal?
You've got to start somewhere, but yes, if you see, these 3 districts are closer to Lusaka on the western side, and we know that Lusaka is the highest demand in terms of charcoal, and so the minister thought of looking at this, and so the suspension has been effected. But in terms of effectiveness, we've seen the minister has been very determined on this one. Recently, we may have seen a number of trucks that have been impounded, laden with charcoal. So it is being enforced. But we also know that it's beyond enforcement. It's important that the people are carried along. And so as we speak, the minister is in these 3 districts this weekend to hold consultations with the leadership in these provinces, the legislators, members of parliament in these districts, the traditional rulers, the business people who are affected by this, but even the community, so that going forward, we don't suffer the worst impacts of climate change. If your local environment is well looked after, the vegetation regenerates. Even when you have impacts of climate change, you find that the effect on that particular locality will be ameliorated. It will not be as severe as we have it now. So that's the reasoning with this ban in the 3 districts.
So if you've prioritized 3, I'm not sure I heard you correctly. What about other parts of the country? Why just the 3 for now? Is it because they are closer to Lusaka, or this is a pilot project, if you will?
As I said, I wouldn't want to preempt the minister's policy direction on this, but one of the reasons is, yes, they are closer to Lusaka, and so they form the buffer zone where Lusaka gets much of its charcoal, just like in the other districts that are closer to Lusaka. But you want to draw lessons. You want to see when you're implementing a policy measure, how it works before you can think of rolling that out. So yes, it is an intervention that is intended to draw lessons and see how this can be replicated in other areas. But for now, it is the 3 districts where the minister has focused his attention.
Is there a way to monitor the escalation of charcoal production? For instance, if we look at 2023 and 2024, would you be in a position to say there's been an increase in production of charcoal? In light of what we are experiencing as a country, load shedding, increased hours of load shedding, has there been a difference, an escalation in charcoal production?
The challenge is that the bulk of the charcoal that you get on the market is actually produced illegally. If charcoal is produced through the legal means with those licenses that I'm talking about, yes, there is a way because the ministry gets reports from the district. Remember, our forestry department has presence in all the districts. So director is able to get reports from all the districts in terms of how many certificates they have issued, licenses, that they have issued, and the expected production. But when you have a lot of it being produced illegally without even those licenses, it becomes very difficult to monitor. But you can tell just by observing traffic, the amount of charcoal that is coming in terms of the trucks that are coming in, that definitely there's been an increase. But you need a bit more analytical study to establish that.
We will be taking a break, but before we do, I would like you to help us understand. Is there a way of producing charcoal sustainably without affecting or depleting our forests?
The code system, which is the licensing system where you designate a particular area, you are given a license, and we identify an area to say, Mr. Mwila, this is where you are going to produce your charcoal. Even the number of trees that you are going to cut is determined. That is supposed to be sustainable because it's not clear cutting. You'll not be allowed to clear all the trees in that locality. And you are given the specific numbers. In fact, it contributes to sustainable forest management because you reduce the crowding of the trees. Those that remain are able to regenerate and grow quickly. So yes, there is a way of producing charcoal sustainably. But the challenge is the illegality and the commercialization, which pushes people now to clear more trees beyond what was authorized. In some cases, clear cutting actually, including the young ones, because people have now cut all the big trees that are supposed to be used for the production. And unfortunately, it is so unsustainable that you don't use the entire tree, just the main stem, and the rest is left to log, which is very unsustainable.
Thank you so much. We'll take a break now. And I think when we are back, we'll look at how that many Zambians, if you're saying there's a charcoal ban, many Zambians may not afford alternative sources. We'll try and address those issues.
Sure.
But for now, we take a break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at the alternative sources of energy apart from charcoal.
The Issue is a program that looks at topical issues happening in the country. Watch The Issue every Friday at 19:30 hours, only on Zanis TV, Channel 6 DTT and Channel 458 DTH on Topstar. Don't miss.
Welcome back to this edition of The Issue. If you're just joining us, we are looking at matters aimed at safeguarding Zambia's forests amidst the rise in demand for charcoal as Zambia faces increased load shedding, or what you may call power rationing. With me in the studio is Ephraim Shitima, Director from the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment. Mr. Shitima, before we went to break, I raised an issue, and I mentioned the fact that many Zambians may not afford other alternative sources of energy apart from charcoal. So how are you addressing the issue between charcoal use and its alternatives? What are you doing as a ministry?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe just to start here with the alternatives. Yes, there are alternatives to charcoal, and there are quite a number. In fact, they are increasing on the market now.
Are
particularly with
these, the question is affordability.
Yes, I'll come to that. You have, for example, liquefied petroleum gas, which is LPG, as gas stoves that people look through. There is also a number of improved stoves, efficient stoves using various forms of biomass, not necessarily charcoal, sawdust, for example. There are those who are using briquettes and other various forms. The question of affordability, of course, comes up. But actually, charcoal isn't even cheap. There have been studies that have shown that families spend more on charcoal, for example, than they would on electricity if it is available. If you take a bag of charcoal, for example, now, the cost of a bag of charcoal is getting beyond 200 kwacha in some areas. And if you're a family of 5 or 6, you're using that for both heating, cooking, and all that, you find that within a week you'll have depleted that. So by the month end, you'll have spent more than 1,000 kwacha just on charcoal. And yet, you wouldn't arguably spend around that amount if we had electricity generally being supplied and you pay. We know that most families would spend probably half of that. Now, other alternatives, the challenge has been the provision. For example, if you take LPG, is it the whole cylinder that you are going to buy? But if you go to the market of charcoal, you can buy in smaller quantities. But the market is now responding. There are suppliers of liquefied petroleum gas now who would allow you to half fill. You don't have to fill the whole cylinder with the gas. You can go and buy just what you can afford at that time. So the affordability issue is being addressed to look at the packaging. Can we be able to compete with a Pamela of charcoal, if you like, the smaller packaging of charcoal, so that these alternatives can also provide that flexibility so that households can rely on the income that they have and get that, and that is being addressed. There are suppliers now of liquefied petroleum gas who are packaging that in smaller quantities, but even when you have a larger cylinder, they are able to allow you to fill your cylinder just with the amount that you can afford, and that's how that is being addressed. But most importantly, what we need to realize is that we cannot rely on charcoal going forward. We are going to run out of trees completely. So it is time that we looked at alternatives. Countries just within the neighborhood, Zimbabwe, for example. Zimbabwe has done very well in terms of addressing the charcoal situation. The economic situation that they have faced and what we have, we know what the situation has been in neighboring countries, including Zimbabwe, but still they haven't resorted to depleting their forest reserves, and so we need to approach it in a similar way.
There are certain areas in this country where forests have actually been encroached. What specific measures are there? Are you also involved in tree planting? Is there any plan? Because there are areas where we've actually completely lost.
Exactly. Actually, it's not
forest
just in
cover.
some areas. Across the country, encroachment has been a challenge. Most of our forest reserves, almost all of them, you find that, yes, on paper you have the boundaries, but when you go on the ground, these are encroached in one way or the other. I think key is sensitization and making the communities see the value in the forest, that a tree has more value when it is standing than when you cut it. And so there are a number of ways. Carbon trading is one that is being promoted, because in areas like Eastern Province where communities are involved in carbon trading, they are participating in those schemes and they are being paid some revenue from that, are able to see that they can get an income that is quite decent while the tree is still standing. So those are some of the measures that we are trying to promote, so that communities who are ultimately the custodians of the forest must get the benefits from the forest as they keep them standing than cutting them down.
Do we see, I hope I'm not pushing you in a tight corner, do we see the issues of carbon trading extending to other parts of the country? Because I think that is an incentive.
It is an incentive, yes, and there are a lot of efforts. There are a lot of project developers in the country who are submitting their proposals, which are being looked at. But of course, there are key issues that we are trying to ensure that you look into that. One is the community benefits that I've talked about. We need to ensure that where carbon projects are being implemented, communities are not disadvantaged, they get a fair share from these carbon credits, because in fact that's what is going to incentivize them to protect the trees. But we also need to ensure that we have a robust framework. It's a complex field, the approval processes that are required, and the general implementation of these require that you have a robust framework which is also predictable, so that the developers know what they're expecting from you. So we need that in place, but also the integrity of the market. We need to ensure that it is a market that everyone can trust, because in the carbon market, the perception globally is very important. When we say we are reducing these emissions through this project, it should be real reductions that anyone can come and check with us and confirm that what we are doing is indeed true.
Who are the key stakeholders as we talking about safeguarding the forests and also implementing charcoal bans? Who are the key stakeholders, and how are you collaborating with these to ensure that these measures are effective?
I think the primary key stakeholder in our natural resources management, beyond just forests, are the communities, the people who live and who have kept these forests over the years. We can't overlook them. They may not have the capital, they may not have the advanced knowledge that we think as scientists we do, but these are the people who have looked after our natural resources for years. So they are key in ensuring that we can look after them. But of course, you need capital to safeguard these and others. And this is where you need investors who can come in to work jointly with the communities and ensure that they manage these forests. We may need to supplement the traditional science that the people have used in the past, particularly with the challenges that we have as climate change. And this is where building their capacity, sensitizing them on climate change, that the situation has changed, the way we managed our forest resources in the past may no longer be effective. And that's where capacity building, sensitization and awareness comes in. But key are the communities themselves to be equipped to manage these resources.
And some of these may include traditional leadership.
Exactly, very important. Very important.
Very key. As we are closing the program, I would like you to share with us your final remarks as we address these issues of safeguarding the forests, and talk about the charcoal ban. I know you don't want to preempt what the minister might get into or talk about as he gets on the road to other places, some parts of this country dealing with these issues. What would be your last remarks?
I think maybe quoting the president in issuing his ban, he indicated that we are going to have immediate measures, mid-term measures and long-term measures. It's very important that the response is immediate. For example, there is relief food that is being distributed to families that are affected, because you can't wait for that. If people haven't harvested, you need to ensure that they are cautioned. So those measures are being implemented, and that's important. But we also need mid-term measures, the growing of winter maize, to ensure that this food shortage doesn't prolong. In a few months, we can harvest what we can make available to the nation and ensure our food security. But with that, we also need long-term measures. How are we going to respond to similar incidents in the coming 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Because climate change is here to stay. Unless we take measures that are going to ensure that we address this as the root cause. And remember, it's not only Zambia responding to the challenge that is going to stop climate change. We need to work as a global community. So we need to ensure that we build our resilience. And that's where, from our side, those interventions which we have already worked on in terms of long-term plans, what would be the climate scenarios in 2035, in 2030, and what we should be doing in the energy, in the agriculture, in the water sectors, are also important to be looked at now, so that we are safeguarding not only our immediate survival, but also our long-term response to this challenge of climate change.
Mr. Shittima, I would like to say thank you so much for accepting to come and share these issues with us on the Issue program.
A pleasure was ours, Mr. Mwila. We look forward to further collaboration. We need to do a lot of this to equip our people to respond to this challenge.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
There you are, viewers. An important discussion on the need to safeguard the Zambia's forests amidst the rising demand for charcoal as Zambia faces increased load shedding. My name is Victor Mwila. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.